Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Alvise Giustiniani, and I work for Philip Morris International. I'm responsible for the group that fights illicit trade, and I'll be moderating this panel today on illicit trade, a destabilizing factor for the economical development. Together with me, I have three distinguished panelists. I'll start from my left. Laurent Macadier, he's a former magistrate in France, and now senior advisor for legal affairs for LVMH in France. It's an international company. Then towards going further, Carlos Moreira. He's an entrepreneur. He is the founder and CEO of WiseKey, a high-tech company. And before that, he had a long career in the UN organization. And then last but not least, Jean-François Tony. He is a prosecutor general in France, a distinguished career for almost 40 years now, and also the president of the Syracuse International Institute, as the name would suggest, institute based in Sicily, Italy, my own country. Before I give the floor to the panelists, let me just maybe set the scene. A couple of pills on illicit trade. I guess not everybody in this room is familiar with the topic. So let me just highlight a couple of points which I think is relevant. The OECD, so the organization we all know, did a report a couple of years ago on illicit trade, tried to quantify the dimension of it. And they came up with a staggering figure which is above $2 trillion. $2 trillion around the world is the turnover of illicit trade. Of course, it's an estimate. The organization that deal in illicit trade do not publish any statistics. When it comes to the sector I know better, so that tobacco, around 10% of all cigarettes smoked around the world are illicit. So 1 out of 10 is illicit. And that's giving a loss of revenues around $40 to $50 billion to the states in lost taxes. So that's the first on numbers, the size. The second one, I would like to mention the dimension in terms of globalization. You would be surprised that I don't think you can think about any product that is not traded illicitly. It goes from fishery to timber, which is logged illicitly in countries and then smuggled in other countries. But it's tobacco, it's alcohol, it's drugs, arms, human trafficking, human organs trafficking. So it's really a global phenomenon. And across the whole world, it doesn't know borders because products flow from one part to the other. It's very easy nowadays with transportation. Containers are cheap to ship from one part of the world to the other. And last but not least, when it comes to the globalization, the organizations that deal with it are international. They have operations in more than one country, often, or they cooperate with organizations in different countries. And often they also cooperate with terrorist organizations, and so that's one way that the terrorists are funding themselves. Third point is the drivers of illicit trade. There are many drivers of illicit trade, but I would say that the biggest one, and it's the most obvious one and understandable one, is to make money. The money you can make in trading illicit trade is huge. Just to give you an example, if you buy a container or cigarettes in some parts of the world, you can get it for $100,000, $150,000. If you smuggle it in a high-priced country like UK or France, you can resell it for $1.5 million. Now, a bit of that money you need to give it to the intermediaries, but $100,000, $1.5 million, you don't need to be great in math to understand that the profit is huge. So I don't want to give you any ideas in this room, but you can buy for $100,000 and sell it $1.5 million. Of course, you need to have some networks in an organization. But the other driver is that the penalties are very low. Do you ever read somebody that goes in prison for smuggling cigarettes? Very, very rarely. And the reason why is the penalties are low, the attention of society is low, politicians and law enforcement have some often bigger fish to fry. So society is not putting the right attention either. Last but not least, and then due to time, I'll give the floor to the panelists. I think an interesting study was done recently and was it was presented in a conference organized by the UNCTAD, which is the UN organization for trade and development based in Geneva. And the study was done by Illicit, which is an organization, an NGO specialized in the fight against illicit trade. And basically the study showed that illicit trade is hampering reaching the 17 SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals. And all of them are impacted because illicit trade is undermining jobs in the countries which has a perverse level of illicit trade. It's undermining states because less revenues to invest in other social activities. Illicit trade is fostering corruption, and corruption, that means it's fostering then less trust in the society, less trust in the country. So I think it's a very interesting study that shows how illicit trade and with related crimes like corruption and money laundering is impacting all the SDGs, or the development towards the 2030 objective. I'll stop it there, and is a framework of illicit trade, and I'll pass the word to my first panelist, Laurent.